Today's show is brought to you in partnership with Clearmotive Marketing. I co-founded this high-impact creative agency over 15 years ago. We deliver marketing that matters to our clients through our three-pillar approach. Number one, research that delivers actionable insights. Two, creative that attracts and engages new customers. And three, which is the backbone of our client success, the people, process, and technology that ensure efficient, consistent, high-quality results. We have great ideas and incredible creative, which is expected from a national agency. What makes us different is that we also simplify workflow, use technology to speed up projects, and recommend activities that achieve higher returns. There is a mountain of work that happens behind the scenes to produce what our clients take for granted, and that's exactly how we want it. Because great creative combined with well-organized operations is why we have such long-standing relationships. For example, Honda Canada has renewed their contract with us annually for the last 12 years. Our clients are market leaders, so they're incredibly competitive. Efficiency, performance, and consistent results are the only way to get to the top and to stay there. If you're not getting the consistent results you need, I can help. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or check out clearmotive.ca. Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. David Maclean. How you doing, buddy?
Amazing. Thanks for having me on.
Oh man, thanks for coming on. I don't even know how we got connected. I love the world that I live in, which is the biggest small town ever, Western Canada, i.e. Calgary, Southern Alberta. You are head of marketing over at Neo Financial. So I just like to dive right in. We'll talk about your role and the realities and the differences in your trip from Toronto to get here. But let's let people into the tent in case they don't know. What is a Neo Financial? And let's launch from there.
Yeah, in the simplest form, Neo Financial is really banking, but done modernly. And people are like, what does modern mean? And I think it's really digital banking. Why go to a branch? Why need those things? If you think of the systems and that they're using, they're in many ways super archaic. The apps that they have, they're difficult to use. And we've got a whole world now that's moved digitized. And why not banking too? And so it's really just making banking simple. And then it comes down to ease of use and simplicity. And then because of the ease of use, simplicity, and all those other things, you can get actually a lot more benefits to users that maybe you don't see at the traditional banks, like bank fees. We don't have those. And so it just makes it really accessible to everyone, as opposed to if you have a bunch of money and you let a bunch of money sit in your bank account, maybe we'll waive the $20 bank fee. Well, you're actually, leave $5,000 sitting in a bank account to get $20 fee waived is really just having your money not working for you. So why should you do that? And it actually doesn't help you in the long run. So it really comes down to just making banking simpler and making it make sense to everyday Canadians. So that's what is really pretty exciting to me about what Neo's doing. And, originally as a credit card business to start, and is really now expanding into full service banking with, everyday money account, which is like a debit checking account that you think of today. And then you got a high interest savings account, which is kind of like, a high interest savings account at other banks. But the difference is we're high interest as opposed to, I crack about this, but I used Simply for a while before this. And back in 2009, I actually fired RBC because I got tired of bank fees. And Neo didn't exist back then. So I moved to what was at the time PC Financial. And they had no banking fees, and that kind of resonated with me a lot. And, what we really now evolved, if you think of where Simply is, they'll do a promo rate, 6% to get you in on a high interest rate for 30 days.
For a set
60
period
days.
of time.
But then it drops to their high interest is 0.7% right now, unless you have over $1 million. So if you're a millionaire, again, the banks work for you. But if you're not a millionaire, unfortunately, the banks, you're working for the banks. And that's what I really love about Neo Financial is the banks are helping you, or we're helping you. And I think that's awesome. Our high interest savings account's 4% every day for everyone. There's no minimum balance, no limitations. So it's pretty awesome. And, we're continuing to introduce new products. I'm pretty excited about something coming out in literally couple weeks. That's going to be pretty cool. Just even getting even more rates, better rates for consumers on their everyday, and then just multitude of other stuff coming and continuing to innovate. But ease of use is something we're super proud of, and just it's so easy. You can set up an account in a couple minutes. Soon we'll have what is a complex transaction that banks do. We're going to be able to do that in minutes on your phone that normally you have to go to a branch, you have to do paperwork, there's a 10-day transfer of money to set it up, and we'll be able to do those in minutes. And even other cooler stuff where you think of new Canadians really struggle when they come to Canada. They might actually have wealth and a great credit history where they come from. They get here and they got to go to a branch, takes days to set up sometimes, and do that. Like, we can do that in the palm of your hand too when you land in the airport. So this is where I think things start really changing. It would digitize, and it's kind of, if you think of where things are going across everything's going native digital in many ways, and just makes it easy for everyone.
From where you guys are at, just a journey from a marketing perspective on terms of like the value propositions in terms, because you just laid out like easily a dozen value propositions, but I think about and use PC Bank or those the internet banks, and people are like, oh, I don't know, they don't have a fixed location, I can't go in, and the lack of trust that was there. Have we moved past that now from a marketing perspective, that it's not so much that I expect it to be digital, so the trust is implied? Now it's about ease of use, speed. And then maybe as I get more sophisticated, then I go, well, shit, what is high interest? And am I just thinking about that journey of kind of like how you bring a customer to change from the way we've done it to the way we're going to do it. And then once they're in your ecosystem, that kind of changes the messaging, right?
Yeah, like, sadly, I'd say the average Canadian is still not moving to digital for their banking stuff. And I think it's a little bit of their parents told them like where to go bank, and they just expected that. And then I think a little bit of Canadians have just become accepting that is what banking is. So what I find a lot with Neo is when I show people how it works, they go, oh, that's actually pretty simple and easy, and that's awesome. But they actually don't expect it because they just became accustomed to the way banking has worked and always has worked. And you think about it, like, there really hasn't been a new bank since the 1800s. And, as they've moved their tech stacks, like, these things are built on technology in 1980s, 1970s in many ways. And so I think Canadians have just really become accustomed to that is the way banking works. And you have to actually experience it. It's almost like you launch, I don't know, raspberry Oreo cookies. People are like, I like raspberries, I like the Oreo, but like that mix is kind of odd. You almost have to taste it. A different market, different type, but like you almost have to experience it. And that's what I'm realizing is so important here, is showing Canadians that actually banking can be super easy, simple, and rewarding in many ways across things. And like, rewarding to me is not just about higher interest rates and that, because like inevitably Bank of Canada rates will come down. We're at like really higher rates for at least a high since like early 2000s. So they'll average out and come down lower, I'm sure, over time, maybe, whether it's a year, 6 months, 2 years, who knows. But like, it's still going to be everyday great value in rewarding banking across everything we do. And rewarding doesn't mean cash back and all those things. Yes, we do that, and yes, it's included. And top like ranked cards across, like credit cards across things, top ranked interest accounts, like those things. But it's also the experience. Like, it was just so easy, I didn't have to think about it. And I kind of think in many ways, successful banking is someone doesn't have to even think about the bank. They're not reminded that the bank didn't get in the way. And so that's what I think is really cool about where we're going to, is like, we're going to make it so easy that you don't have to think about us, but we're also going to try to make sure you're aware on your finance, where how's your cash flow management going? How's your spending month to month, budgeting, and helping you on those if you want to take advantage of them. And other things like you can have it so that you get notified when a purchase happens on your phone. So, hey, like, $23 just happened at McDonald's. I'm sitting at home. What happened? Like instant, like, hey, let's get on that, versus, who knows, get run for a bunch, and then you have to deal with your bank for weeks
and you hope the bank's algorithm flags it, and then you get that call, and then you wonder even if that call is a scam and who's actually calling you. Totally. When you guys map out your customer segments from like, from a demographics perspective versus a psychographics, like, are you looking for, is this typically skewing more young, or that's an easy, almost get out of jail free card when you market, oh, it's a younger set, so we're going to market that way, versus like, no, this is what our audience values, and they could be 50 or they could be 30. Maybe how we communicate. Talk to me a little bit about like the marketer's dilemma of how you find the people that have that common value set of what they care about versus you're young and you're old, just to be really lazy with those terms.
Yeah. So like, the biggest thing coming into the financial industry and looking at this is it's actually dependent on the product type. Because it's just like, for example, there's not many 18-year-olds getting a mortgage. Not saying there's none, but there's not many.
Yes.
And so
percentage-wise, that's lower than it is if you're probably 27 to 35, I would guess.
Yeah, totally. Or like well-established professional in your 40s and 50s, like a mortgage is probably a renewal or something to that stage is probably a much more common thing. So I don't necessarily look at it as age. I will say I think the Neo brand and how it was initiated out the door was probably a little more geared towards youth. And I think that'll be a lovely evolution we'll go through to really embracing that what we're really talking about is digitally savvy users or digital first users.
Okay. That makes sense.
And that exists across all ages and all like cultural groups. Like, you know, in some cultural groups will come higher propensity to use it because, like, you know, for example, in India, like digital in your mobile or banking in your hand has been more common a lot longer. Whereas in Canada, actually, the expectation is if they even have an app, I'm lucky, right? And so, and if their app, it's just I can do maybe a check deposit or see my balance type thing, like call in or check the website for more. Like, not that there wasn't a website, but like I literally, you know, young enough and old enough to remember actually having to pay for RBC direct investing, which was literally just the ability to log in to see the stocks go up and down and be able to buy. And then they charged me a fee on top of that to buy the fee. And like, you know, I think it was like $9.99 or $12 or $15 a month. I can't remember, but like to just think now where like the idea to just go look and see what's happening on the stock market, it's democratized on Google search if you want it, right? Let alone
it comes preloaded. It comes preloaded on your phone.
Totally.
So that's the comment you made earlier about the challenges that New Canadians have, but also what I heard you say is they're coming from markets where they're also much more comfortable. Like that's a double win. They're coming here going, oh my God, this is so difficult for me because I'm not quote unquote from here, but I'm also coming from a jurisdiction or a part of the world where this has been expected for years. Like that's an interesting opportunity from a customer segmentation perspective.
Totally. And if you look at like the modern banking or digital banking or you know, the fintech front, we're probably on the late adoption side in Canada. If you look, like even you go to the UK, right? You got like Monzo, Starling, N20. I'm forgetting a few, literally, but like they're actually years ahead, starting in the mid 2014, 15 range, and really accelerated. And if you look at like a Monzo, for example, like they're a meaningful share of the market for banking there. And why? Because hey, like actually, it took a while to get the flywheel to go. But when people realize like, oh, actually banking can be very simple and done, it gets exciting that you can just do that and put it aside and not have to worry. Like, who wants to go to a branch? Like, listen, there are some people that do. Peace be with them. But
it's the minority, not the majority. Where maybe 5 or 8 years ago, I don't even know how long you'd have to go back again. Not very far, where it was probably the other way.
Yeah, like, and it's interesting, like the cost to serve that is super expensive. Yes, it's a marketing vehicle and built into the community too, that it's visible in that. But the cost to serve that is also super expensive. And you start thinking about like, how could you reinvest those costs into more value? Well, it's like we can give more rewarding banking in multiple ways. One, continual investment in the app versus like one update a year. And that's the thing that's been incredible to me at Neo is just like the sheer volume of changes and updates and enhancements and new products and things going on here is like 10x what I've seen anywhere else. Like the innovation and the drive here is incredible. Now there's a level of like some of the functions that we're catching up to what is table stakes, and there's other elements that we already have innovated and improved those things. And so I just think it's pretty exciting, and I see it moving at such a high pace that sometimes I find even as a marketer keeping up with the go-to-market and really maximizing the yield of that product launch it's difficult because it's like, oh man, we're working on that next launch that's a massive product.
Yeah, and each one is a big thing, but it's also still just the next thing that we're working on. What's your relationship as head of marketing? Like how closely your head of product, your product team, like that interrelationship. And, I was on a panel with Neo a little while back talking about the product marketing role versus product management, product marketing versus head of marketing. When everything you do is about the product that you have behind the scenes, what's that relationship look like as a marketer?
Yeah, like I think great tech companies or great companies on development are driven off of customer insights or opportunities. There is the classic Henry Ford, like if I asked them, they'd want faster horses, whatever. But in general, like truly understanding what they're doing. And sometimes I even think of it in banking side of things is like, well, it's not like, what do they because if you ask them like, hey, what are the things you want from a digital bank? They're probably going to tell you the same things that they want at their bank. But when then you realize it's like, well, what are the periphery things they're using to substitute what their bank isn't doing?
I like that. How do you? It's because it's all about customer insights, but how are you framing what you're asking, right?
Totally.
For them to even be able to answer something that it's a bit of abstract. Like that's that customer centricity model of like knowing what they need before they need it. Because if they already know it and they already asked for it, then it looks a lot more like customer service.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like it just becomes really intriguing when you start thinking about that, because then it's like, well, what are you really doing and how are you substituting that? And so that's really where I found like a lot of the insight, because like you think about it, right? Like if you ever gone on a vacation with other families or a guy's trip or your wife got, like, what do you do to settle up the expenses? I
use Splitwise actually.
Well, that's where I was going.
100%. I'm like, I know exactly what, I made my life so much easier.
Yeah. So you're not expecting your bank to do that. And so if I asked you, you'd probably not say, oh man, like it'd be so much easier if I could do a sharing group to split the expenses of a trip. You wouldn't say that because you're
That's
like,
a great example.
I found an alternative. And so we'd go off and we'd go build like, a line of credit, which like, every bank's got a line of credit because everyone's going to say, get line of credit. Like, and I want it to be easy, and I want to do it off my phone, and I don't want to have to go in, and I don't want to have to mortgage my second child and all that. Yeah. And not that we shouldn't do that too, but then you start going like, how are we making this experience like the one app simplicity that they're going to want and create to just like truly like, okay, I don't have to jump around or like your solution over there is Splitwise is better. Maybe I should just do that. And like, why do I need this? So anyways, I just start thinking about it. Not that we're building Splitwise. I'm just literally using it.
I think that's a fabulous example. Because if it's integrated, then when I get to the end of Splitwise, I can just then transfer the balance or receive whatever it is. Like that's a fantastic example, because I wouldn't even have thought of I'm like, oh, my bank is not going to do that in a million years. It wouldn't even have crossed my mind. But yet it's a huge benefit to me that time that I need it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like there's so many other problems that are periphery to I need my credit card to work, or my debit card, or my high interest good. There's like other financial things people are doing, like, trying to save at a retailer store. So if you start thinking like they're looking for coupons and other things, and it's like, okay, well, how can you have a rewarding, simple cash back program potentially? And so, they might not have necessarily said that like, oh, like I just expect rewards on my card, but hey, how can we do meaningful stuff? Which is where we have things like we have cash back partners. You can get 5, 10, 15%. In fact, I had one who even for a temporary did 100% cash back because they wanted to drive it. But like, it was a way that they were incentivizing trial on their product, right? Totally. And it just becomes like, hey, you need these things every day. So for them, it was like, why are you going to Shoppers all the time when we actually can have it direct to your door, save you the time I'm going, and like save you money too. So go. And so it just connects to, it's a whole ecosystem of driving value for consumers.
So as an organization, from sitting here thinking about someone listening from the outside, do you have a specific team on product that is looking for that white space versus the team that's also collecting direct customer feedback? Like, hey, I need my credit application to be, my line of credit application to be easier. Talk to me about just the mechanism, because you guys are large. What's your headcount over there, just to give context of the size of NEO?
I think 700-800 ballpark.
That's what that's what I thought. So you've got teams to support teams, basically.
Yeah, like it's complex, right? Like it's banking, and you don't want to mess around in this. So you've got everything from fraud monitoring to like protection, security. So there's a lot built into those things. There's obviously customer support. I'd say our marketing team is a smaller team, and we're building up. But like to answer your last question and this question kind of combined, because I don't think I fairly answered your last question.
That's okay.
But like
that's why I do these in long form, so we have time to explore.
But like product marketing, I think, is a real function and that is important, and it becomes like a quarterback in many ways amongst the teams to help kind of what is the customer needs and build around. Doesn't mean it owns it, just to be clear, but it helps guide, like, here's what customers are telling us, here's the feedback, here are the customers we're going after, here's what they like, they do, they consume, their needs, why, understanding them, and then fueling that in with the product teams in an integrated way to like, what should we work on? How can we do that differently? Like joint accounts is a real thing, right? Like you and your partner may have a bank account that you share. It's very common for families that start living together. And in some cases, if people have kids, they'll even be joint accounts with kids because, hey, like I want to make sure you have $100 if you get lost that you can get an Uber home, whatever those type things. Both on the card side and the bank side, depending, or pay your allowance on the debit side. If you think about it, that's easy ways to do that. Particularly in a way now you think more and more like, do you even have cash in your wallet? Like my
allowance was dollar bills, but that was many years ago.
Yeah. But like for me, like I don't think I've had any money in my wallet for, I don't know, like months, if not years, because
I think I've had the same $60 in there for at least like a quarter, actually.
Yeah,
for 2 or 3 months.
and so cash isn't used the same level, so like paying allowance becomes that, so joint on that. But anyways, back to
I appreciate it, even on the smallest detail of like how the world has changed.
Yeah, and then so that you think about the product marketing in that function and why it becomes so important is it's just truly what are consumers really doing, because that's where you would probe deeper of what are your periphery things you're using, what are the problems you're trying to charge, and so that integration. And I'd say at Neo, there's like a strategy team, there's the marketing team, which we're building up a little bit with product marketing function being really new to Neo, but it's not new as in like people weren't doing the functions that a product marketer would do. It was just scattered across strategy folks, across the product folks. And in some cases, some of the stuff we were building was just obvious we needed to do it. So like this is now like where I think we go to the next level is really understanding and honing in. But it also changes how you tell your story. So, I talked a little bit earlier where I think the early version of our brand really was connected to youth, and the real concept. It
had a bit of a rebellious, like going again. We're not your parents' bank, and I don't know if that was one of your taglines, but that's what I was left with when I saw the brand the first few times.
Yeah, that's pretty common. To most people would say to me that similar theme to what you just said of their impression of it. Like I think the watermark and the logo can work really across anything, and I think is quite sharp. And now it's just like the color palettes and even the imagery and how do we evolve that, recognizing like showing an 18-year-old on a skateboard is not really effective for a mortgage, because like it's a disconnect. We also have a lot of new Canadians, and how do that really represent that in a large way, and then just really representing like trust and integrity that you want and expect from your bank. Because I always look at our biggest enemy on banking innovation is actually two things. One is trust, and I think we actually now have a lot of claims and legitimacy to why trust. Like you think of the brands that we actually also support, like Tim Hortons, HBC, and some other stuff that we do, that's a trust level. There's two, like are ranked the #1 financial app in Canada from both the Android store and the Apple store, like #1 rank. That's a pretty nice claim. 3, like across a ton of publishers and affiliates, they time and time again have us top ranked across a multitude of our cards and products. So there's really a lot of trust claims coming through that within the brands we support, because why would Tim Hortons put their product in the hands of something that is not trustworthy? But then you get past trust, and I'm not saying we are all fully there, because an average Canadian probably still believes RBC equals legitimate, not a top 5 bank, not legitimate. And I think if I was working at a top 5 bank, I would love to continue to infuse that
I would camp out on that all day long. Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's nothing being curbed to do that. The legislation and the government moving towards, new bank approvals, and that is kind of set up to, you really got to go through a lot of trust hoops, which totally makes sense. Yes. But at a very, very slow pace versus in UK, they moved it at accelerated rates and hence have been doing it for 10 plus years and growing in at now their levels where that Monzo's viewed as a top bank effectively in the UK. Whereas here we're still in the, hey, they're early. Let's see what's going to happen with these things. And so trust. But then point 2 where I was going with my long ramble was inertia actually becomes your biggest enemy after that. And I saw this to a degree in my wireless past. It's funny, I correlate a lot of my past experience very much in analogous to Neo, and that I ran a brand called Public Mobile. And Public Mobile was the first digital-only wireless provider in Canada. What happened is we bought this company, Public Mobile, that were basically going bankrupt, and we bought them, and I ended up running the brand. And how do we make it work in the TELUS ecosystem? So TELUS has TELUS brand, and then there's the kind of mid-tier brand Koodo, and then there was this public entity. How do we do it? And it was ultimately when you manage in that, in a market that is not necessarily pushing on disruption and balancing it, how do you create space in there? And it was really hey, why have all these expensive stores and call centers and all these other things when we can really just do wireless, pick up the card. At the time you needed a physical card. Now you don't even need the physical card, SIM card when I say that. Mm-hmm. And you could just be lit up. And so they're saving us costs. Well, how do we give some of that back and balance it while not sacrificing access to a great network? Because the problem with the Freedom
that
Mobile,
was always the perception, right? If I pay less, I'm going to get less. And I don't want that.
Exactly. And the irony in that is the Koodo Mobile is on the same network as TELUS, right? Or Fido is on the same network as Rogers, or Virgin's on the same network as Bell, but the perception is always worse network and stuff. But what we could really pound home is hey, same great network, better cost, which was value for money for customers, was sacrificed. You can't call a call center, right? But I realized customers didn't want to call the call center. And I don't think the average consumer wants to go to a branch. I think it's some of the system forces it we got to do paperwork and we need to make sure an advisor takes all these steps on
because that model is to get you in so we can sell you some other products. Most of us know what that journey is about, right? Totally.
Even as I was moving to Calgary, I had to break my mortgage that I had in Toronto to come here. And so I just, for shits and giggles, decided to explore what would be to port my mortgage over. And there was so many asterisks and hoops, and realistically it was going to cost me more money than to get a new mortgage. And so I ended up having to pay break fees, which to this day I'm still why do break fees on mortgage exist? It just is so I'm paying you back the money I owed you, and I'm a good customer, but I owe you a lot of money to do that. And I get it.
Because we're losing the ability to continue to make money off you, and we don't like that.
Yeah, totally. And but they can take that money and loan it out to someone else. But the argument's always we had guaranteed to put it to make this right, so you owe us that. And I just, again, I'm not an expert in this. I'm learning the industry.
I feel you haven't gotten over it, David. I feel this is still an issue to be processed.
It is. And so it pains me to think about that. So I look forward to a future where we can evolve those and change those and look at that yes, we may be losing you on this product, but how do we win you in the long run? Because TD will never, ever, ever get my services again. And not because I work at Neo, but because I got hosed
because of the experience you had or didn't have. Right?
Yeah, I got hosed on moving to Calgary on a mortgage perspective. In reality, my mortgage here is the same as it was there, pretty much lower because housing costs are that. Yeah. So it could have made it work. I think if there was a way to do it, but it wasn't designed for that because I think they viewed me as better to get the break fee and then get me on a really another crappy mortgage rate. So
it's interesting. I had a conversation with one of my advisors. Our business banking is with RBC, and we had lunch. We had the banker lunch. You know how it happens. And one of the individuals who was selling me under our account is from the Ukraine, and she's been here 3 years. And I said, "What are the main differences?" She goes, "The lack of ability to customize anything, even at a business level, until you are beyond like senior in terms of your level of funds and money and size."
Yep.
She goes, "Over there, it was like a little bit harder to get in, but once you're in, we would work with that business because what's their cash flow needs? What's their inventory turn? Here, you get X product or Y product, and that's it."
Yep.
She goes, "The lack of customization." She goes, "We'll let you in sooner, but we won't really do anything to work with you compared to what I was used to." She goes, "It was a pretty tough transition for me as an established banker, and I came here and there was almost no personalization." And she was talking specifically at the business level, but
Yep.
I just had not heard that perspective before. I just thought it was interesting and kind of relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, I can go into business banking too. We don't have it at Neo, but I hope someday that becomes...
Yeah, I didn't think you did, but it's good to clarify for the audience. Yeah.
I really do hope there, because I actually think of most segments, that's probably small businesses are probably the one that are getting hurt the most on the way the banking is set up for them. Like I had a pizza shop for 3 years. I owned a Panago Pizza franchise in Toronto in Liberty Village. And like literally got charged fees just to deposit our money into the account. And you know, like you had to have these little handhelds that your pizza delivery people would go out with, because like you're doing 5 deliveries at a time. And so you have 6, we had to think 6 terminals to go out. And so each of those is a deposit into your account. Well, you had like X number of transactions, which would get blown through on those terminals on a daily basis. And then they charge you the fee on the fee. And then there would be like deposit charges for the cash that we'd have, because there were still at the time probably 50-50 cash and 50-50 cards payment. And it was just like, it worked out that I was paying easily all in probably about $1,000 in multiple different fees for stuff a month, that it was just like, wow, like to an average small business, $1,000 is literally the difference of them taking home a profit versus not.
Well, and if you put it in the concept of on a per pizza basis, that's a lot of pizzas to pay for $1,000 in fees. Yeah, totally.
And so it was just mind blowing to me that they're like, so actually I have a fair amount of money running through you, and you're charging me more for it. Versus you think on the consumer lens, it's the opposite. It's right. It's actually what they do is like, if you have a lot of money, we'll waive some fees. If you don't have any money, we're going to gouge you. And so it's actually the other way around. And in business banking, to your point, it kind of is almost like until you're running crazy money that we'd be petrified to lose you. Like we know you're not going to leave us, so we're going to mint you on every fee. So I actually think there's a ton of innovation or at least optimization in that space.
Yeah, look for the opportunity. Hey, talk to me a little bit about being in Toronto, marketer in Toronto, moving to Calgary, coming into our market. You and I have chatted a little bit, I think, offline officially on just level of sophistication, even where our market's at versus Toronto from a marketer's perspective, but also a product perspective. Talk to me a little bit of even, your journey from there to here. And I love that we're bringing talent from Toronto to Calgary, but I'd love to unpack that a little bit, even kind of surprises or disappointments or not. I like to talk about both, but specifically from a marketing and a product perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been pleasantly surprised more than I expected in regards to at least the sophistication of Neo and what they're doing. So like from the product development and stuff here, like I spent 3 years at FreshBooks. Like I can honestly say we probably launched more releases and updates and changes and new product in a month than we did in a year or two at FreshBooks. Like, and it's not to say that FreshBooks isn't driving a ton of changes. Like there's changes going on all the time there too, right? Like you got to update the way GLs are coded and all the other things in accounting software, invoicing. Like there's a lot of tweaks that are always optimized, and they were really good there at like hearing the customer's problem and then adjusting those things quite frequently. But like the innovation here is just next level on all the changes and the complexity of the financial industry, because you got trust is ultimately the goal, and there's
a high degree of governance and as there should be, right?
Totally. So that's actually been great. And then it's interesting because I think the folks at Neo had the foresight in really like, as we're building this in the prairies, and they're very proud to building businesses in the prairies, as you know, Skip the Dishes being in the PEG and now into Calgary, and they were purposeful of building it out here because they really believe like building the ecosystem out here. And so, you know, Tech Thursdays is something that Neo started and driving to that because they really saw there's a need in the community for people to collaborate, to meet others and understand, so that we can all level each other up. The difference at Tech, I don't know what the Tech Thursday equivalent in Toronto. I went to it. It's a much bigger event, but it's like a one a month type thing. It's a paid thing. So a little less accessible, and it's a little more pitchy of people pitching like their product with a talk about it than I'd find here, which is like, hey, product marketing is the topic. Talk about why does it matter? How should it be structured? How does it org? Because like it's genuinely, I think the intent is help people, teach people, coach people to think about it to solve their own problem for their own business as they're scaling or building, and that versus, you know, there's probably, I had a talk on go to market back in October, so earlier in my move here, I've been looking to build this product marketing team here because I think it's so important. And at room of 300 plus people at the one I was at, and I asked the room, and I just like, how many people are in product marketing or have product marketing in their companies? Actually, what I asked, and 5 people out of 300 lifted their hands, which was like, whoa. Now, not that function and things they do aren't called product marketing everywhere. The version of what product marketing is at one place to another can actually vary. But in general, there was like no one has that. And I found that very simple. So the transition from Toronto, that there's certain functions I found are just harder to find experience here versus having to build it here. And so, you know, like a lot of corporate offices in Canada, companies, they're typically in Toronto or Vancouver and sometimes Montreal a bit. And the ones that are in Calgary tend to be oil and gas or other things. And so when you're looking for like
less
a
on the tech
marketer,
and more on the industrial side.
Yeah. And like even like a telco life cycle manager would be very applicable across to finances, because, you know, subscription, but also ongoing multi-product bundling, all those things. Yep. So, you know, you can dabble in some life cycle people here, but like even oil and gas doesn't really have those life cycle people. So it's a balance of like that depth in certain functions are not all yet here, and they're building. And so, but I found the very difference is like going to the tech communities in Toronto was like, people feel like you're pitching to them and are less open to meeting and connecting. Whereas I found here, it was like people like, how can I help you? Like, what's going on? What are you learning? What do you transition? Here's 10 places you should take your family on the weekend. Like, and just like a much more like, what I call it is a big, small town. Because like Calgary actually is quite big and growing quite rapidly too. Like probably like it's a big city, probably the fastest growing big city in Canada.
Well, I think we had the highest net new immigration last year, and not migration, immigration last year. Totally. Which is, you know, I moved here in 2000 when there was maybe 800,000 people, and what are we now, like 1.5 or 1.6? And yet it still feels like a small town in a lot of ways. But yeah, I know, I love the big small town moniker. I overuse that. Yeah,
and it's good and bad. Like the bad, I think, is like, you know, thinking through public transportation and the efficiencies of that. Like I think the city is expanding faster than the transportation setup is. Like, I'll use my example. I accidentally bought a place that actually has a fairly express bus from my door to downtown. So it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It was an accident. I didn't realize it was there, but I bought in that area because it was only a 10-minute drive into the core, but it was out of the core that I, you know, didn't feel like I was in. And
coming from Toronto, the housing, it's just a completely different mindset here.
Oh yeah, we can go down that rabbit hole for a bit too. But so, anyways, like this bus I take, I get up every morning, I check the app, when's the next bus coming. Some days it shows me when the next bus is coming. Next day it's not showing me. I have 3 apps that I use, of which sometimes one shows, sometimes
to try to
shows.
Triangulate the bus time.
Exactly. So I know, like listen, in the summertime, if I'm outside for 10 minutes, who cares? In the wintertime, like, you know, like 2 weeks ago when it was super cold, like I didn't want to sit out there waiting, is it coming or not? Because it says like it's due at 8:15, but like it comes at 8:55, like I would have been frozen and passed away. And so I just, that in Toronto doesn't exist, or at least if it did, it was an accident that day. Something went down. Like I knew.
It was the outlier, not the norm.
Yeah, I knew to the minute when that bus was coming, or yes, maybe there'd be delays on the subway if you got to the subway, but like you just knew a subway was always coming. And so, here, if I suspect people migrate towards the LRT line because it just makes it easier to go in the core if you have to go into the core. But like the buses, to me, it's crazy. Like I went out, it was said my bus was, because my bus goes to the front door of the office, so I'm spoiled. But it said it was coming, it was 5:20, and I was like, I'm going to get home for dinner. So I got out there at 5:20. The bus showed as 2 minutes away. It never came. Then another one was coming, and I could take two buses. There's like a 66 and a 22 are the two buses I could take. And then a 22 was coming. Great. Out of service. Then the next one out of service. The next one out of service. It was then 6:30. I'd been outside for an hour and 10 minutes. 5 out of service buses and 3 ghost buses went by. Ghost as in it never came. And then finally the 6:30, the bus, the 66 that I'm supposed to get on came, but it turned into a 22. And so the difference of a 66 to a 22 to me is about a 15-minute bus ride. Like it's 15 minutes longer on the 22, but it's 66 till it gets there. And literally after my stop, it turns to a 22. So it's like this is just so frustrating. So anyways, my random rant is like,
I got you. We can do better.
And like, it's so basic. Like put a freaking TELUS SIM card on every bus and you can GPS ping it, put it on an API that can go out to any app that wants to make. The city of Calgary doesn't have to make the app, and it could literally know where that bus is at any given moment and to the time. And like, Google, literally, you use Google, I can punch in bus 66 and it will sometimes show me where the bus is, sometimes not. But I can't understand why sometimes it doesn't. And I think it's actually, I genuinely think why, is someone is got Google on their phone on that, and it's picking up their ping as opposed to the bus's ping, and thus it's giving me it's predictably on the. But anyways, I could be totally wrong, but it doesn't make sense to me.
The point being is that we can do better, and if we're going to be bringing in people from cities where there's an expectation of things working a certain way, those are the things that really grind your gears on a daily basis. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because the inverse is like, I'll flip it. Like, then you might as well be remote, right? Like I could work for a Calgary company remote. If it's going to be frustrating to get downtown, because like parking in Calgary is too expensive. The city probably should not want everyone to have to come down, so make it easier. Like I think it makes sense. And so I don't want to drive down here. I don't want to pay for the parking. I don't want to be stuck in the traffic. Now, I'll say every time a Calgarian complains about traffic, I laugh because you are from Toronto. That is a different reference point. Yeah, like I probably go the same distance here to work as in Toronto, maybe slightly further in Toronto, but like my drive to work, which I drove to work, was 45 minutes. My drive here is 10. And it's not that it's the distance; it's actually the density of the traffic and the flow puts in the bottlenecks. Versus here, there is a bottleneck, which like 9th Avenue or 9th Street. I always get wrong with streets or avenues. I'm still figuring that out. But like 9th, that kind of comes in. That's kind of a bottleneck because there's really the only artery from, I guess, that would be the west side into the core. Mm-hmm. So like, that is, but it's still nominal in comparison to that bottleneck on the Gardner in Toronto. It is a standstill. It's like actually a standstill.
So from an overall, I appreciate the bus rant, because that could be that in itself is real, freezing to death or not freezing to death. But overall, like that if there's any of your cohort from Toronto listening, like, do I really want to move to Calgary? And like, what's a Calgary and why? Oh, it's a bunch of hicks. And is it still from a tech and from so many people I talk to, it's like, hey, yeah, that's great. I can come for a job, but what's that next job? And what's the career growth look like from a person in your level of seniority, experience, and your expertise? It clearly felt like a viable option for you. You made the move. looking back to other people thinking about moving out here, would you say yes, do it? Like, and that's a real black and white kind of way to ask that question.
Yeah, so listen, we can come at this from a couple angles. One of in-office type come out here. One is another is a remote, because you mean in theory the company doesn't have to be in Calgary and you could come here too. So we come at it from both those angles. Like I think one, Neo's magic mojo to me is the in-office. Like there's decisions that I would have seen as 7 Zoom calls in 7 weeks, 7 months at FreshBooks are literally, and I'm not trying to slight FreshBooks, like a great company.
No, just two different versions.
But like we became effectively, and they became effectively remote. I found that you went through a lot of more Jenga on setting up the calendars. You had to add new people to get decision and go, and then it dragged out for a long time versus like, hey, you, let's get on the whiteboard. Like, can this work? Can this work? Could this work? Hey, get a product dever into like, I could go at it this way. And then next thing you know, some of these things are like changed the next day. Like I've literally seen an idea get fixed in the app and changed in the app the next day. So like it's pretty incredible on that. And then even strategy pivots and decisions, because inevitably you might believe something's a good idea and 3 months later, like, you know what, that feels like it's not making sense anymore. I just find like those pivots and that are so quick in ability and integrated here that it's pretty awesome. So from an in-office perspective, like let's go at that. I believe, I just genuinely believe this, and I'm biased obviously, but I came from remote coming to in-office. I was in office before the remote.
Okay.
There's a big radical difference in relationships in the two worlds. Like remote, I find is very transactional relationships. I don't really know you, but we talk when I need something from you or you need something from me, which is like, it's kind of like if you had a kid or a dog who only came to you when they were hungry, but any other time they hid from you. Like it's like very transactional.
I think those are called cats.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Totally.
All the cat people just got off. Just push stop right now. I'm just joking.
Totally. No, like I had a cat, so I can equate to that for a fair amount. And so very transactional, and in the depth of the relationships tend to be fairly low because are you really booking a 30-minute call just to shoot the shit about like their lives versus, hey, we're both here in the office, let's grab lunch, we can shoot the shit and or get a coffee, or hey, we're both in the hallway waiting for the meeting room to open up, like let's talk. And then I've called them more connected relationships because now I know like Tyler's a human, right? Like had I only just met you on 2 of these videos and it helped running into you at Tech Thursday, in all honesty,
100%
it humanizes you that much more.
It instantly made it real for whatever that means.
And I call it very similar to the Facebook reaction. Like, have you ever watched some of the vile shit people say on there to other people?
I stopped watching because of that, like sole reason.
Well, this is intriguing.
On Facebook specifically.
Because play it back. Like, they have their name on that account. They have their address, their kids' photos, but they're still saying like, you're a beep, 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 and like just attacking someone. And the reason that they're doing that is they're not real human to them. It's a transaction. It's like, you're not real. I've never met you.
Well, you're dehumanizing your enemy, right? Which is like,
it's almost
there's
the
a whole
same
psychology around that. Yeah.
Totally. It's like the same concept of you could say bad things about Taylor Swift if you never really know her, right? And so they're doing the same thing, but to everyday normal people. And it's like, wow, it's kind of sad. So anyways, that's, to me, those are much more transactional, and you're much more willing to be, people are much more behave different ways that I just think is unconnected. And I love the in-office because I think it's connected. And I actually think we're robbing youth now of experiencing true connected work relationships.
I think depending where you are in your career and the type of work you're doing, it's such a complex conversation that gets boiled down to in or out. I'm like, well, no, that's not actually the conversation. There's so much more to discuss.
Yeah, like I think of if I had access to my VP at 22 years old in the office to ask them questions, literally sitting beside me at my desk because we don't have offices, like that would have been a dream for me, because the development, the real time asking versus like, I'll book a meeting with my VP in a month and hopefully like he gives me time or she gives me time. And like, it's just like the development opportunity of that is so incredible. And then literally like I watch it because like remote gets super dependent on like Slack and all these other things.
For sure.
No one picks up the phone and just says like, hey, like, I assigned you 3 things. Like, can we talk about them? They literally just send it on Slack and like, oh, you didn't do them? Like, dude, I had 74 Slack messages last night. How did I know yours was like the one I needed to be on? And 2, like, maybe it would have been nice if we just talked about it.
Well, Slack is the worst place to task because of exactly that. But that's a whole other, it's also the proper use of the tool. But when you have that one in front of you and it's the quote unquote easiest, that's where people default. We've wrestled with those similar demons.
Yeah, I giggle, but I say to my team, like, hey, like, you're sitting beside each other. Don't Slack them. Just turn your head and go, hey, let's do this. And, I think we've created...
Yeah, let's be clear. People still do it in the office with the headphones on, and they're like, you're sending me a message. I can see you right there.
Yeah. So anyways, I think a real opportunity. So now I started the in-office, but like the Calgary thing, and I haven't answered that fully, but like I genuinely think it's a pretty cool city and a pretty welcoming community. And I literally, I got invited to Platform Calgary, which is just down the street here from our office. But they are doing like different groups of different functions and organizations and leaders in them and bringing them together to talk and brainstorm and develop in that. So I got invited to like this growth users one. And I've met some phenomenal people there. I've been at the Tech Thursdays and I've met some people, and it just really helped me blossom my thinking and ideas while also helping them think of ideas for their growth problems and that. And they started like an HR one now that I've encouraged like our HR lead to go into, and a product one and all these things. And I just found that the community is super welcoming. And then even the Tech Thursdays, like I love to go to them just because I run into a lot of people that are just like, hey, I'm trying to build my business and do these. I'm like, okay, think of these 3 things. Like, go, good luck. Like, if I could help in a way.
There's a level of energy that comes with new and I don't know and I'm willing to explore. And Calgary is a city where people are like, hey, maybe I can't help you, but let me introduce you to someone that can.
Exactly.
I've always found the city where people follow through with the introduction. They actually do it.
Yeah, and I've been introduced to a whole bunch of people, and I haven't had time to meet them all yet, but I actually had found ways to find in evenings and other things to meet, and like I just feel like I've made more of a broader network in like 5 months I've been here than probably the last 2 or 3 years in Toronto in many ways.
Well, that's a powerful statement. I love that. There's your t-shirt quote right there.
Yeah, so
I like that.
That's been awesome. Now, from a remote perspective, and flip because this is benefit to in person too, but yeah, like I think it is definitely getting in early in the burgeoning of a lot of things, like not phase 1. I think Calgary's in phase 2 probably in a lot of this stuff. And if you think of it like in a 4-phase program is kind of how I mentally think about it. And so there's really a community building here. They're open-minded and welcoming and sharing, so it actually does it. There's new businesses and dev or tech or learning coming here, so like to actually access talent is getting better every day, right? Like I'm actually now starting to see a few product marketers trickle in. It's been 5 months, 6 months. I'm starting to see that now that they're around and they're accessible and they're building in other groups like, Benevity's building product marketing. You've got good lawyers are thinking about product marketing. You've got Zayzoom and Helsum and others like that who, are really thinking these things through now because there's been a lot of conversations over the last 5 months of how important they are, right? And I think Shub over at Zayzoom, he's probably a bigger preacher of the importance of product marketing than I am. And I think that is starting to really reflect on, okay, we're starting to build that ecosystem and do that. Developers in that is obviously getting built because of all of those tech companies and others that are going here. So that's really coming along. So I think that's great. And so I just say cost of living is like way, way cheaper, right? Like, you could get a house. My math when I was moving here was probably about 60%. The same house, about 60% the cost of Toronto.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because you would have done that. This is 5 months old. This is pretty fresh data for you from that perspective.
Yeah, so like someone coming from Toronto could be coming from two situations, well, probably more than two, but like 2 kind of core situations, either renting and can maybe now buy, or B, they have equity in a home and can actually like take that equity out and put some in the bank and or go mortgage free, and or like upgrade a house if they want to. Get
a little more bang for their buck with depending. Again, it's all about your formula and what you value, right? Totally.
And so like to me, like I could come here with I could get a nicer home that really fit our family well, but were cheaper, which was pretty cool. So that balance was nice for us, and we were really geared towards what school districts and stuff like that, which like for us mattered. And so that was our decision points, but it was like great. So then you got taxation's lower. I think there's the offside of that we could talk about on the schooling system that I think is as a product probably of that. But like income tax is lower, which is pretty cool. So cost of living and that, like food prices, I'm finding might be slightly a little more expensive here in that regard.
Food is definitely spendy here for sure. You get so blind to it because it's what's in front of you. But totally. you travel a little bit and you're like, oh shit, I thought this was going to to be more, especially the grocery basket.
Yeah, and like gas though is crazy cheaper, and so like there's a balance on those things, and then like the access to nature, the view of the mountains. Like our office out that way has a view of the mountains, and unfortunately, when I interviewed in the summer and that the fires were going on, you couldn't.
Oh,
see
you were
it.
here early, yeah.
And even I found September, October, they weren't clear. Like you couldn't really see them from the office. It was still the mist or something. And November hit, and I did this like, that's why I'm here.
There's been some epic views the last kind of few months. That's funny to say that, where they almost look like they're glowing.
Yeah, like it just is. And in the skies every morning, I stop every morning and look at that sky and just go, wow. So around like
stop and smell the roses.
Yeah, like right now this time of year, it's around 7:20 is when the sky's like probably peak awesome. 7:30 maybe, and probably going to creep up earlier and earlier now. But like, it's like this beautiful, like it can go purple, pink, orangey.
Sunrises are epic,
and it's so humbling. And the mountains, seeing them humbling, and it's just so awesome on that front. And then the welcoming community, like our neighbors and that, it's just been great. So I actually find from a lifestyle, it's great. Now, like if you're into nightclubs and that downtown stuff, I couldn't genuinely answer how that life is.
No, that's not me. That hasn't been on my radar for a little while, but there's probably another podcast for that. It's just not this one.
So like,
I appreciate I appreciate the, you can't see the label when you're inside the bottle. And I've been in this bottle for 20 years and I'm a huge advocate of Alberta, but I'm also objective and go, well, yeah, I can see this and see that. So to hear your perspective, and I have a couple other friends in the tech scene that have moved here and have bought businesses and established, and they're like, it's kind of the best kept secret. My friends kind of look down their nose at me for moving to Calgary, but I'm like, they don't know how much, and from like probably 30 years old all the way to kind of mid 40s, like in that kind of sweet spot of career and, that economical powerhouse time of your career.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there is lots of career opportunities here. I've seen it. I'm seeing the development. I'm seeing the ecosystem. So what a great way to put more money in your pocket and also have a growth and be part of building some stuff too. Because it's different, different business for different things. Like I've spent many years at TELUS, but I'll tell you, I was on TELUS Wireless, and wireless was building and growing at that time.
Which is a different energy than an established kind of business. Yeah.
It is. I watched as my time near the end at TELUS, it was much more like, how do we cut costs for growth than it was, how do we do innovative or creative things to drive growth for customers?
Interesting, because that changes the whole way of working.
It does, and it also changes people's behavior. I think it also changes leadership styles, because you shift from like, let's gamble and try some things that are based on educated bets, not like literally gambling, but like let's try some stuff, to hey, I don't know if I want to take any risk because it's my job on the line because they'll save the cost without me type thing. And so you watch behavior.
Well, it's arguably those are two different leaders. Like that's actually often not even the same. You don't need that team to do that. You don't need the SWAT team when everything's calm and collected, right? It's different.
So anyways, I think that's the nice part of some of this burgeoning here.
Well, and it sounds certainly where you kind of landed full force in Neo with just the ability, the speed, the agility, like all those buzzwords. It sounds like you're living in it. It sounds like you love it as well. It sounds like that's your flavor. Yeah. Like
I mean, I'm 5 months in, we're doing cool things. I also believe in the purpose, right? Which is truly changing banking for Canadians, and doing it better for all Canadians. And in a way, it can succeed in a multitude of ways, but I actually to me, it's not just about like F the big banks. It's actually genuine, like just make banking better and we all do better so Canadians get better out of it. Better services, better support, more for their money, more value for what they're doing. If you think about like, game changer for me in my life, I was about 15 or 14, I can't remember. I read The Wealthy Barber. It's funny, it's been
It might be still buried in one of my bookshelves over here somewhere, but yeah, I got you.
It's funny, like that book has been in my head since the day I read it. Now, I can't honestly tell you if I went back, I might read it again and be like, that's the worst book ever. But at the time when I read it, I knew nothing about money to like very thoughtful about making sure I was saving money for the future while living for now and how to do that. Because it's not like you don't have to make 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 to save money, right? Like it's like put $50 away a month. If you start putting $50 away a month at the age of 18 and don't fucking touch it, that is like, you can be a millionaire. You just can. And so like, it's really around the purposeful saving and understanding things. And so I started not long after that, thinking about everything I bought in how many hours I had to work to get that. And so
that brings it home. That makes it very real, very quick.
So as a teenager and a university student is like, this pitcher of beer is 2 hours of work. Is it worth it or not? And that started changing the things that I would do or not do and how I would offset those. And so again, live the now versus the not, but it would change to, hey, like I could pre-drink and get like 4 beers.
I love that it wasn't about not drinking; it was about drinking smarter. And I think my buddy got into home brews just so we could drink 2 or 3 of them before we went out and save ourselves a fortune.
Totally. And like, listen, it didn't mean to bring this into alcohol, but it was it contextualized.
If people are still listening, they've hung on to the end, so they're clearly liking the flavor that we got going on here. If not, it's just you and I having a chat, man, which is cool.
Yeah. And so it's same with anything. And so like, do I need even when I got my first car, it was like a used car because it was like, what is the incremental value I'm going to get from the, call it 3 to 4 months work or 5 months work that the difference of a used car to a new car would cost you.
That new car smell, what is it worth? What are you willing to pay?
Totally.
If I look back, I've always bought, and now I'm at a point where I can buy the perfect used at the 20 to 30K mark because I just can't financially bring myself to lose that much money for nothing. I just can't do it.
It's like, again, it's to each their own. I've learned in life.
100%.
Everyone has their own thing. So my thing is I buy lunch every day. I could save money on lunches for sure, no doubt. But I have this like, I do want to vary on lunches, and I do not want to pack my lunch and spend the time to do that. I hate doing lunches for my kids. I don't want to do it for me either. And so I like, that is my thing. So I probably spend on average about $15 a day on a lunch that I could have probably made for $4.
But more importantly, it's correlated directly to what matters to you or what doesn't matter to you in that context. Right?
That's my thing. So like, again, I wouldn't judge anyone if the new cars are important or because there's people that cars.
But that's the beauty of this, right? We all have the power to do what's important to us, and we just look at other people for examples and learning. You're like, oh, I kind of like that formula, and that's what I love about it. Is there's no right or wrong.
Yeah,
the wrong is when you're not actually understanding deeply enough what does matter and doesn't matter to you. Because if the goalposts keep moving, that's a good way to never save anything, right?
Yeah, and like even if you think of like why come to a company in the stage it's at too, right? Which like you come to a company that's early stage where we're at, you're balancing more like pay and equity, and
there's often a little bit of a haircut on one with the upside of potential for the other, right?
Yeah, because like you do too much on pay and you're taking away the potential of growth and you starve the company and actually could set it up to failure because it's running too hot on costs and not fuel
based on the stage that it's at, right?
And like, so I also think of these things as like purpose, right? Like I do believe in it. One of my favorite books, Dan Pink, Drive, is my favorite book. And it just mastery, autonomy, purpose are the 3 things that really engage people in work, not pay. Pay is a disengager, not an engager. So if you know the person beside you is making 20 grand more, 30 grand more doing the same thing you're doing, you're going to be pissed and disengaged. But I can't give you 200 grand more in pay and get more out of you, Tyler. You're going to deliver the same good quality. It doesn't get exponentially better by paying you more. Your market value might go up, and I need to keep you there so you don't get disengaged. But me giving you more doesn't improve your production value. What really keeps you engaged and keeps you going is like purpose in what you're working for. Do you believe in what you are doing and your company is doing to do that, in the way your role fits on that purpose? Because it can be role dependent on the purpose within that. Like, I'm building really cool product. This is awesome. Like, purpose is cool, innovative product. To me, purpose for me in a Neo is like, we're actually can change everyday Canadian lives. That means more than a little bit more pay, because it's like, this is like, it has a real so what to me. But this is where I went down this rant and started down this rant was a little bit from back to the car example, and these different things matter to different people. When you get down to it, you realize, like, you know, as I interview a bunch of candidates, some of them just don't give a shit about banking at all, and not motivated by it at all. They're motivated by, like, I want like a prestigious job title, or I want to live in Calgary, or I actually want to hit it big on equity, or literally like, I just want the most pay, and that's what they want. And you realize, like, the job could be the perfect fit for what they need in their career and their stages, but actually might not be the fit for what they actually want. So it's just so intriguing and thinking it through, the differences of people.
And as a hiring manager, being able to navigate that and see that is a very, like, that's a skill, and that comes with experience, but you need to know what to look for. And it's hard when sometimes us as individuals, we're not even clear why we want what we want, right? Especially at earlier stages in our careers, or just earlier stages in life cycles.
Yeah,
not that getting old makes you smarter, but sometimes you learn a few things along the way.
Yeah, like the biggest life learning for me was owning a pizza shop. It's actually where I learned the most about myself. You know, if people come to me all the time still like, oh, I'm thinking about doing one, should I do one? I can give you like, hey, take it for a grain of salt, because you're going to get a day view. But like, here's the 5 things that you should be mentally processing if you're going to do it, because this is what was changed and made a big impact to my life. But what I learned out of that is I actually am not an entrepreneur. I am an intrapreneur. And there's a very different things.
I saw that on your LinkedIn profile, actually.
Yeah, and a lot of people like, what the fuck's an intrapreneur? But like, in reality, like, an entrepreneur is going out and like, I know the problem, I want to go solve it, I'm going to go do it, and I want to run that. I thought I wanted that, going and get a pizza shop, own my own business, be my own boss. What I realized is I'm super motivated by visionary people around me who I can help them get to their vision, but I am not the lone wolf of the vision. And so I, like, coming here, Neo, right? Like the founding team here, like the founders, incredible, right? Like, and across the board on just what they've done and how forward thinking they are on things, not only from a tech perspective, but from a lens and what needs to change. Like, they didn't come do banking for shits and giggles. Like, no, like, banking is probably the hardest space to crack, arguably. And so maybe healthcare would be the one other space, but like, I would say banking's probably the hardest to crack, just because all the regulation, they don't approve new banks. Like, you know, it's actually geared towards like less banks than more, and competition's not really encouraged in many ways. And so it's actually very difficult. And, you know, these guys came from Skip the Dishes, which was an innovation, and at the time, like, really getting food delivery to the door, and they were near the front of the line of doing that, to they could all be retired and doing nothing, and they chose to like go attack one of the hardest spaces to go do. Why? Because they're like, man, I really hate my banking, it could be done better, let's go do it. And like, there's no one in this company working harder than the 4 of those, the 4 founders. Like, I'm like, they're on all the time, intense, like, in a good way, and a lot of great things. And it motivates me to like, hey, these guys got a vision, and I don't even have the answers every day on how to deliver on it, but it's exciting to go figure it out, trying to solve it, and then break into that, because I got to break inertia, which I told you earlier is my biggest enemy. My biggest enemy is inertia, because I got past trust. Inertia, people are like, I've just been doing this banking thing forever. I'm used to paying $20 a month. I'm
Your
used
biggest
to
competitor is the status quo.
It is. It totally is. And so, like, actually, irony why you think of most of these new banks start with youth is because it's actually a decision point for a lot of youth that they're in. Like, I'm picking
it's
my
the McDonald's
my
model.
first.
Get him young. Get him in with a Happy Meal.
Totally. Am I listening to my mom and dad, or am I gonna try this like digital thing that someone was saying was kind of cool? And as they become,
well, you're at a phase when you're also
professionals, it
deliberately trying not to listen to mom and dad in a lot of ways, just because of that.
Totally. Anyways, that was a roundabout way of maybe not answering your question.
You know what? I got so wrapped up in what we're talking about, I lost sight of the question, so I think that was fine. David, thanks for coming on, man. That was a fun chat. We covered a lot. So if you're still with us at the end, you clearly are drinking our Kool-Aid at this point.
Yeah.
But that was welcome to Calgary. Thanks for making the leap, and I'm always loving. Excuse me. When talent sees that opportunity and comes here and is able to make a difference and an impact, I'm all in. I came here 24 years ago, never even been here, packed my car and drove across here at 26 years old in the middle of winter. Wow. In hindsight, it was a terrible idea, but yet the best thing I ever did. So welcome to the club.
Yeah. I'm excited. It's been an awesome 5 months, and I am continuing looking forward to getting more familiar with the city, the mountains, which I haven't done enough of getting out to them. It's nice to see them, but now to actually touch them.
I know you got to make that next step. Don't be one of those Calgarians who goes, yeah, they look so nice. I just don't go there.
Yeah, like I'm not a skier, nor is my family. So I need to find the balance.
That's okay. There was no snow this year. This year's been terrible. As a snowboarder, it sucks. It's a terrible year.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
But what you got to do is got to get family to come and visit, because then that forces you to go to Drumhill or to the dinosaur thing, and then it forces you to go to Canmore and Banff and do all the things. Like the only time I ever go up to Calgary Tower is when friends come. They're like, can we go up? I'm like, sure. Kind of like CN Tower a little bit. Yeah, it's not on my list. It's not on my day to day. But obviously, neofinancial.com. Get started. It seems pretty straightforward. I don't need to. There doesn't need. You do not require a roadmap. The button's big and blue, and it's right in the middle of the screen.
Totally, and it can right on your phone in 30 seconds and set up. So it's pretty easy.
Your business. David, thanks, my friend. That was an absolute pleasure. Hey, if somebody wants to reach out and chat with you and kind of get connected with you as part of the community, LinkedIn, or do you have a preference? What's your secret code for comms? Yeah,
like in a world of there's way too many channels to communicate through, I say LinkedIn is the most efficient to get to, because like you get in a Slack world at work, you don't check your email to the same degree. I always say email becomes your FYI me as opposed to need something from me in a Slack world totally. When you're using Slack. So I think LinkedIn is absolutely the best place to get a hold of me.
David Maclean, Maclen with capital L, just in case anybody's curious. There's a couple of you, if you because it's easy to type that one wrong. Yeah. But David, I really enjoyed our chat. Thanks for taking the time for coming on, and it was a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Amazing, Tyler. Thank you.